Losing a queen is one of the most panic-inducing moments in beekeeping, and panic almost always leads to the same place: buy a new one, fast. In 1923, commercial beekeepers rarely did that, not because replacement queens were unavailable, but because they understood something most modern beekeepers have lost. Under the right conditions, with the right intervention at the right moment, a colony can raise its own queen. And the queen it raises from its own genetics, in its own environment, is often a better long-term outcome than the one that arrives in a mailing cage. But there is a window. It is narrow, specific, and most beekeepers close it without realizing it, often in the first hours after discovery, before they have even checked whether the colony still has the biological material to act on its own. Here is why the panic and buy response is so understandable and so costly at the same time. The moment you know a colony is queenless, the clock appears to be running against you. The colony is losing population every day. No new eggs, no emerging brood in 3 weeks. The forager workforce aging out with nothing to replace it. The instinct to intervene immediately is correct. The specific intervention most modern beekeepers choose, ordering a replacement queen, is where the logic breaks down. A purchased queen introduced to a queenless colony faces rejection rates that are routinely underestimated. Worker bees that have been queenless for even a short period develop a colony odor and a behavioral state that is hostile to a foreign queen. The longer the colony has been queenless before introduction, the higher the rejection probability. And the queen the colony would have raised from its own young brood, genetically matched to the colony, developed inside the hive's own thermal environment, would have faced no such barrier. If this biology-first breakdown is useful to you, a like helps more beekeepers find it. Before any technique, here is something you can assess right now without knowing the full method. When you discover a colony is queenless, the single most important first step is not ordering a queen. It is checking whether the colony still has young brood. Specifically, are there eggs or larvae younger than 3 days old present on any frame in the brood nest? If yes, that colony has the biological raw material to raise its own queen. The workers can and will begin the process within hours of recognizing queenlessness if those larvae are present and if the beekeeper does nothing to interrupt it. That single observation, young brood present or absent, determines which management path applies. Most beekeepers skip this check entirely and go straight to the replacement decision, which means they are solving a problem that may not exist yet, and simultaneously closing the window the colony needed to solve it itself. The biology of emergency queen rearing is more precise than most beekeepers realize. When a colony loses its queen, workers detect the absence within 6 to 12 hours through the fading of queen pheromone in the hive. The response begins almost immediately. Workers identify fertilized eggs and larvae younger than roughly 2 to 3 days old on the brood frames, begin enlarging those cells downward, and start provisioning them with royal jelly in quantities that shift larval development toward queen physiology rather than worker physiology. The decision of which larvae to select is not random. Workers show a consistent preference for the youngest available larvae, typically those less than 2 days post-hatch, because younger larvae have a longer developmental window in which royal jelly can redirect their physiological trajectory. This process is well established in the biological literature and has been observed consistently across managed colonies. The colony does not need the beekeeper to graft, to select, or to do anything beyond providing the right conditions for the process to run. This is the point where the 1923 rule becomes specific. The commercial beekeepers of that era had identified a precise window, roughly the first 72 hours after queen loss, during which the colony's emergency rearing process was most likely to produce a viable, well-provisioned queen. Within that window, the key variables they managed were simple but non-negotiable. First, the presence of young brood. If the colony lacked eggs or larvae younger than 3 days, it could not initiate emergency rearing on its own, and a single frame of open brood from a donor colony, placed directly into the queenless hive within that 72-hour window, gave the colony the material it needed. Second, the colony's population. A colony too small to maintain brood nest temperature and provide adequate nurse bee attention to developing queens would produce poor quality emergency cells regardless of brood availability. The 1923 operators set a threshold. A candidate colony for self-rearing had to be covering at least 5 to 6 frames of bees. Below that, they combined or supported rather than waiting. If this research is useful, the Join button below supports it. Members get the monthly Beekeeper's Almanac and the historical recipe cards. The donor brood frame technique is where the 1923 method becomes most precise and most misunderstood today. When a queenless colony lacked its own young brood, either because the queen had been failing for some time before her loss, or because the timing of the loss left no eggs young enough, the intervention was a single frame of open brood, taken from the strongest colony in the apiary and placed into the center of the queenless colony's brood nest. This frame had to meet 3 criteria. It had to contain eggs or larvae no older than 2 to 3 days post-hatch. It had to be covered with nurse bees at the time of transfer. Those nurse bees transferred with the frame were essential to the immediate provisioning of potential queen cells. And it had to be placed centrally in the brood nest, not at the margin, because the queenless colony's nurse bees would concentrate their attention on the frames closest to the cluster center first. A frame placed at the outer edge of the brood nest often sat unworked for long enough that the larvae aged past the usable window before workers reached them. The timing argument the 1923 beekeepers made against purchased queens was not sentimental. It was economic and biological. A purchased queen in the 1920s was expensive relative to the income a colony produced, and introduction failure rates were a genuine cost that operators tracked. Beyond the financial calculation, there was a biological one. A queen, raised from the colony's own genetics, was already adapted to the local environment, already familiar in odor and pheromone profile to the workers, and had developed inside the thermal conditions the colony itself maintained. A mailed queen, however high her genetic quality, had been pulled from a different gene pool, shipped across climate zones, and introduced to workers whose chemical environment had shifted during her absence. The 1923 tradition was not opposed to purchased queens in all circumstances. They used them for requeening healthy colonies on a planned schedule. What they resisted was the panic purchase as the first response to emergency queenlessness, because they knew the colony often had a better option available if given 72 hours and the right conditions. The biology was the argument, not the price. Here is the single habit that undoes this entire method, and it is done with good intentions every time. Most beekeepers who attempt to let a colony self-rear still make one consistent error. They open the hive repeatedly during the emergency rearing period to check on progress. Each opening during the critical 10 to 14 days after queen cell initiation risks chilling developing queens, disrupting nurse bee attendance, and, most damaging, accidentally destroying capped queen cells that are not yet visible as such. The 1923 operators treated the queenless colony as a system that needed space to work, not supervision. After confirming young brood was present and colony population was adequate, they closed the hive and did not open it for a minimum of 10 days. The first inspection after that 10-day window was to assess whether queen cells had been capped and were progressing. The second, 7 to 10 days later, was to check for the presence of a laying queen. Patience, specifically the discipline of not looking, was as much a part of the method as the brood frame placement. There is a condition that makes everything above irrelevant: the laying worker colony. When a colony has been queenless long enough, typically more than 3 to 4 weeks without young brood available, individual workers begin laying unfertilized eggs. Their ovaries, normally suppressed by queen pheromone, activate in her absence. These eggs produce only drones. The colony sounds different when opened, with a roar of agitated bees rather than the lower hum of a queen-right colony. The brood pattern, if brood exists, is scattered and irregular, with multiple eggs per cell. A colony in this state cannot self-rear. It has lost the worker physiology required to properly provision queen cells, and even if introduced to a frame of young brood, it will often raise poor-quality emergency cells or fail to raise viable queens at all. This is the condition the 1923 beekeepers were working to prevent, not cure, by acting within that initial 72-hour window. Here is the line you cannot cross back over. The distinction between a colony that is queenless and recoverable and a colony that has developed into a laying worker situation is the most critical diagnostic the 1923 method depended on, and it is entirely a function of time and available brood. A colony queenless for fewer than 3 weeks, with young brood available, is in the recoverable window. A colony queenless for more than 3 to 4 weeks, with no young brood and a scattered drone-heavy brood pattern, has crossed into laying worker territory and requires a fundamentally different intervention, usually the introduction of a purchased queen with specific acceptance protocols or merger with a queen-right colony. The 1923 rule was not a rule for all queenless situations. It was a rule specifically for the early window, and its power came entirely from acting before that window closed. Acting after it closed was not a variation of the method. It was a different problem entirely. Why did the discipline of working within the 72-hour window largely fade from mainstream beekeeping guidance? The same forces that erased much of the pre-war practical tradition, but with a specific commercial accelerant: the growth of the commercial queen-rearing industry. By the mid-20th century, mailed queens had become inexpensive, widely available, and heavily marketed as the standard emergency response to queenlessness. Extension literature began defaulting to purchase as the first recommendation, rather than the last resort for colonies that could not self-rear. The biological case for self-rearing, local genetics, zero rejection risk, no shipping stress on the queen, did not disappear. The economic case for a purchased queen became more compelling simply because the price dropped and the availability increased. The 72-hour window still exists biologically. The colony still prefers to rear its own queen when it can. The method still works when applied correctly. What changed was not the biology, but the commercial context that made patience less economically necessary. The practical protocol is direct. When you discover a colony is queenless, do not order a queen immediately. Perform the 2-part assessment first. Check for young brood. Are there eggs or larvae younger than 3 days old on any brood frame? Check colony population. Is the colony covering at least 5 to 6 frames of bees? If young brood is present and population is adequate, close the hive and allow the colony to initiate emergency rearing. Do not open it for 10 days. If young brood is absent but population is adequate, locate the strongest colony in your apiary, identify a frame containing eggs or larvae younger than 3 days, ensure it is covered with nurse bees, and transfer it into the center of the queenless colony's brood nest. Close the hive. Do not open it for 10 days. At the 10-day inspection, look for capped queen cells. If present, close again and wait 7 to 10 more days before checking for a laying queen. If no queen cells are visible at the 10-day mark and the colony has crossed into laying worker behavior, that is the point at which purchased queen introduction or colony merger becomes the appropriate next step. One calibration this protocol requires is an honest assessment of your apiary's inspection discipline. The 72-hour window assumes you discover queenlessness promptly, within a day or two of the queen's actual loss. Beekeepers who inspect infrequently may discover a queenless colony that has already been without a queen for a week or more, which compresses the available window significantly and may have already allowed the youngest larvae to age past the usable threshold. This is the strongest argument for regular inspections during the active season, not because you need to intervene often, but because early detection preserves options that late detection eliminates. A colony discovered queenless on day 2 has all its options open. A colony discovered queenless on day 20 has most of them already closed. The 1923 commercials operators inspected on a schedule not out of anxiety, but out of a clear-eyed understanding that the cost of late discovery was always higher than the cost of routine checking. What you are preserving when you work within this window is not just a queen. It is the colony's biological continuity, the genetic line of the queen that built that colony's population, its behavioral tendencies, its winter survival record. A purchased queen introduces entirely different genetics, with all the uncertainty that entails in a specific local environment. The queen raised from the colony's own brood carries the proven genetics forward. The queen raised from the colony's own brood carries something a maled queen cannot: the specific behavioral profile that the colony's local conditions and its existing worker population already know how to support. That is not a small thing in a managed apiary, where queen quality is one of the primary variables that separates productive seasons from mediocre ones. Have you ever lost a queen and let the colony raise its own replacement, and been surprised by the result? Tell me what season it happened, and how that colony performed. Subscribe for more historically grounded beekeeping, and if you want to see how a failing queen signals her decline weeks before she is lost, that early detection breakdown is next.